Hello, this is your video lesson on female reproductive anatomy. Here is your basic overview of the system, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit about where the egg starts, where the egg goes, and the fate of the egg with and without fertilization. So here we go. So the first place we're going to start is the ovaries. So there are two ovaries, and they're about the size of an almond. They're not very big. They always look bigger on the diagrams, but they're about the size of an almond. The ovaries have two main purposes. They release the female hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Just like in the male, the testicle released testosterone, the male hormone. In the female, the ovaries release estrogen and progesterone. The other very important job of the ovaries is to store and release the eggs. Okay? They release one egg per month. Interesting little fact about the ovaries. The ovaries do not produce eggs every day. Remember when we talked about the male, we said that there are millions and millions of sperm produced every day. So there's always fresh new sperm. The eggs are present in the female ovaries when a baby girl is born. So they mature, and then at the time of puberty, the female begins to release an egg approximately once every 28 days. Typically, they alternate sides, so right ovary January, left ovary February, etc. The process of that egg coming out of the ovary is called ovulation. And it is part of the woman's cycle. And we'll talk more about the cycle in a minute. Again, all eggs are in the ovaries at birth. They mature at puberty, and then ovulation starts. And that's when a girl gets her first period. It's all connected. Again, you'll see this in the picture on the next slide. But the ovary is right here, and you see that the fallopian tube is not attached to the ovary. Okay, sometimes when we look at these diagrams, it looks like they're connected. They are not. The ovary is connected to the abdomen by this ligament right here, but the ovary itself is not connected to this fallopian tube. Okay? Fallopian tubes are these passageways right here and right here, and those passageways, that's where the egg travels from the ovary. It gets sucked up into this fallopian tube, and it takes 4 or 5 days for it to travel down this tube to get to the uterus. Usually, and this is an important thing to remember, that is where an egg is fertilized. So if there are sperm present, okay, the egg will most likely get fertilized along this journey, the path of the fallopian tube. Okay? So the fallopian tubes have these tiny hair-like projections called cilia that move the egg along. So when we talked about sperm, we said that sperm swim, and they do. They swim in the semen, they have little tails, and they move and propel themselves. Eggs do not. Eggs have no way to propel themselves, so these tiny little hair-like projections kind of push them along the fallopian tube to get to the uterus. And the fallopian tubes are about 4 inches long. So here's another diagram that will show you there's a lot of different ways of looking at this, and the 3D diagrams for the female reproductive system really give you a good idea of how they're positioned in the abdomen, rather than just this idea that they're just straight up and down, because they're not. They actually fall back, and then the ovaries come forward. So here's the uterus. right here. This is the fallopian tube. And then these little things, these little finger-like things, are called fimbriae. And you see that they kind of wrap around the ovary. They're not connected, but they wrap around that ovary and they move around. So when a follicle develops, which is an egg that's just about to come out, when that develops, those fimbriae beat and they kind of suck that egg up right into the fallopian tube. If you can imagine these little finger-like things moving around. All right, moving on. The next organ is the uterus. Now, the uterus is very muscular, and it needs to be muscular. This is the part in class where I would say, why do you suppose the uterus is so muscular? And you would all come up with fabulous answers. But unfortunately, I have to answer my own questions. The uterus is muscular because it's got to push a baby out. Okay, that's one of the reasons why it is so muscular, is pushes that baby right out of there. And the woman gets contractions of the uterus. And those contractions are those muscles contracting, the uterine muscles, to expel that baby. Now, those contractions are the same muscles and the same contractions as when a female has her period and she has cramps. So the cramps of a period are the same contractions as when a woman's in labor giving birth. Now, obviously, contractions giving birth are a lot more, I don't want to say severe, but they're a lot stronger contractions than when a woman has her period, okay? So the uterus is where the egg develops. Pardon me. It is when the egg is fertilized in the fallopian tube, it'll come down and nestle itself right into the lining of the uterus. And then it becomes its home for the next 9 months if everything goes well. And that blood supply in the uterus supplies, helps nourish that baby and help it grow up. Now, the uterine lining builds up every month. It thinks that there's going to be a fertilized egg. So it prepares every 28 days, approximately. Every woman's cycle is a different length. But it prepares itself every month to house this fertilized egg. And it's going, oh, this is going to be the month. I know this month is going to be the one where we have a fertilized egg. If there's no fertilized egg, then that lining, wah, 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 no egg this month, it sloughs off, and that's when a female has her period. Okay? And then guess what? It starts all over again a few days later. It starts building up in preparation for that fertilized egg. So, the endometrium is the lining of the uterus that thickens. So you see this lining right, oopsie, sorry, go back. Okay, so you see this lining of the uterus right here. That's what thickens to prepare for that fertilized egg. Okay, and menstruation, or a girl's period, is what happens when there's no fertilized egg. And there's a little video I'll show you that shows that. So let's talk about the cervix. The cervix is very important, and it's not really an actual organ. It's the opening at the base of the cervix. So it's a narrow opening at the base of the cervix. You've probably heard people or on TV or wherever say that someone is dilated to 6, or they are or aren't dilated. Dilate means opening, okay? So when someone's dilated to 5, it means their cervix is open 5 centimeters, not inches, centimeters. There's a big difference, okay? So the dilation needs to be, 8 to 10 centimeters in order for the baby to be born. It is also the cervix, the place where pap smear cells are taken to check for abnormal cells that could lead to cancer. So, this picture gives you another good idea about female reproductive anatomy. So here's what's happening. This is a female laying on her back, and her right leg has been conveniently removed so that we can see a cross section of her abdomen. Okay, so let's look more carefully at what's going on. Up here, this opening right here, and this structure, this is the bladder and the urethra. Okay, so this is where urine leaves the body, from the bladder to the outside of the body. Then down below here, this is the rectum and the anus. So this is where bowel movements or poop or fecal matter leaves the body. Okay, so you've got one exit, another exit, and then there in the middle there is a third opening, which is the vagina. Okay, and what you see here, this metal thing that looks like a duck bill, that's called a speculum, and that is a device the doctor uses to take cells from this cervix for a pap smear. Okay, so the vagina is not like a hollow tube. It's more like a deflated balloon. The lining collapses on itself. So in order to access this area here, which is the cervix, the doctor will need to open up the vagina, and they use the speculum to do that. So they insert the speculum into the vagina and open it up a little bit, and then the doctor will take a small wand, like a little cardboard, not cardboard, but a little wooden specula thing. It goes in there and just takes some cells off of this cervix, and then takes it out and removes the speculum, and it's back to normal. This is not painful. It can be uncomfortable, and it might even be a little awkward if you're not used to it, if you're young. But this pap smear is important because it will detect abnormal cells early that could lead to cervical cancer. So you can catch that abnormality early so it can be treated before it gets too serious. This is also a procedure that needs to be done most of the time. Some of the organizations are changing, but it used to be that if you wanted to go on a hormonal birth control, you had to have a pap smear. Okay. The doctor might also be checking just the overall health of your reproductive system. Okay. So that is a pap smear, and that is the view of the reproductive system of the female. You've got bladder opening, vagina, and rectum or anus. 3 openings down here, folks. So the vagina, which I've already talked about, is this birth canal. Okay, so review: ovary, fallopian tube, uterus, endometrium, cervix, and then the vagina. Vagina is a hollow muscular passage. Again, more muscles, childbirth. Okay, it leads from the uterus to the outside of the body. The vagina is where the penis enters during sexual intercourse. Okay, so when a penis goes in the vagina, it inserts here, and that's how the sperm get to the egg. Remember, the egg's hanging out over here, and the sperm are ejaculated down here. So those sperm have to take quite a journey to get to their egg. Okay. Also, just a comment about sexual intercourse. The penis does not go past the vagina. It cannot go up into the cervix or up into the uterus. A penis will only go in the vagina. The walls of the vagina are very elastic and stretchy, okay? They have to accommodate that baby, and they go back into shape afterwards. All right. So there are 3 different things on the next slide. And the next slide is a picture of the external female reproductive system. It's a little bit alarming. It's a picture that it's a medical diagram of the female reproductive anatomy. There are 3 things. They have the labia minora, which are these folds of skin that protect the opening to the vagina and the urethra. And they vary in length and color. Then there's the labia majora. Those are the rounded folds of skin. They're a little bit larger, a little bit fattier, and they, again, are present for protection. And then the third organ is the clitoris or clitoris. It is a small nub of tissue. It doesn't provide a direct role in reproduction. Remember, this is all about reproduction, having a baby. But it is very important in sexual arousal. And in the big picture, sexual arousal is very important when it comes to reproduction. The sexual arousal helps with lubrication, and lubrication helps with the movement of sperm, which helps the sperm get to the egg. So here's the next slide. These external organs all together are called the vulva. So this entire region is called the vulva. Now, if a woman were laying on her back like this, if a female was laying on her back, it wouldn't look like this, okay? They have moved these things. Oh my goodness. Pardon me. They have opened up these structures so that we can see what they are. But typically a woman laying like this would not be open like that. So down here you have the anus. Way up top here is the clitoris. The clitoris is here. The urethra is here. Okay? And then the vagina opening is here. Vaginal opening. Here are your labia minora, these thinner pieces and folds of skin. And then these larger fatty folds of skin, those are the labia majora. Okay? All right, and we don't need to worry about that because we're not looking at your thing. This is included in the slideshow so you can kind of see how these organs are positioned. They don't just go straight up. They actually, vaginal opening, from the vaginal opening, they tilt back toward the lower back. Then the uterus actually bends forward a little bit. Okay, so this just gives you an idea of how these organs sit in the abdomen. All right, let's watch this video. There's no words to this video, so I'm just gonna talk as it goes. Those are eggs. Okay, and this is signifying that it's actually glands in the brain that begin all of this stuff. So the messages come from the brain, hormonal messages, and those hormonal messages are sent to the reproductive system, and it says, okay, time to get going. And that's ovulation. An egg just came out of the ovary, and now it's going into the fallopian tube. These yellow dots, again, more hormones. Okay, those hormones are going to go from the ovary into the uterus, and they're going to say, hey, uterus, get ready, here comes an egg. So here's our egg. It is going to float down the fallopian tube. This is the inside of the fallopian tube. You can see those little cilia moving that egg along. Now the egg has reached the uterus. Look at that uterine lining building up. Okay? It's all ready for a fertilized egg. Uh-oh. Here comes the fertilizers. Here come the sperm. Now, this is not to scale. Sperm do not look that big. Okay? They're tiny, tiny. Okay? One sperm gets in there. There is a fertilized egg. Notice that it was fertilized in the fallopian tube. And now that egg is going to sit in the lining of the uterus and grow into a baby. Here's what happens when there's no sperm. Okay? There's the egg looking for sperm. No sperm. Goes to the uterus. Not fertilized. So it says, okay, we're out of here. The egg leaves. And so does the lining of the uterus. That's when a female has her period. And that's it. All right. So let's go back to, I think there's just one more thing on the slide. All right. So that's it for the female reproductive system. Let me know if you have questions. I will put additional resources in the folder for you today. Take care.